All right, let's get things kicked off. Okay, first and foremost, I want to make sure that we thank our sponsors. So as I call your name, if you could raise your hand, I'd appreciate it. So Mike from La Pata, all the way in the back. Mike from La Pata. Hey, thank you. Are Brittany or Brian here from Parkside? Nope, Parkside. Grant from Atomic, if you could raise your hand. Hey, Grant, thank you. We got Jason over here from Swift Systems running the live stream. Larry from Weiss. Where are you at, buddy? Here you are. Great, thank you. Tom from Black Twig couldn't make it, but Greg, where are you? Here we are. Thank you. CMA, did anybody come from CMA? I know that they had a corporate retreat today, so I don't think CMA is here. Paul from Pulcinelli, you in the crowd? Yeah, all the way in the back. Hey, Paul. And Matt from Scarin Insurance. All right, all the way in the back. Great, thank you. They make everything possible. So the seat you're sitting in, the coffee you're drinking, everything, our speaker, they make it all happen. So today we've got a really special speaker. I've come to know Cyril over the years, just a fantastic guy, been through a lot of hard things in life, has a great family, great wife. His wife spoke here a couple of years ago on one of her books, I believe, or one of her topics, but just a real spiritual, blessed individual, although he runs into a lot of challenges in life, and he's got one going on right now that he may share with you. But just really, it's a real pleasure to have you here today, bud. So Cyril is the CEO of Advanced Cell Engineering. With a strong track record of driving turnaround and growth in international companies, Cyril excels in leading change, building high-performing management teams, diversifying sales channels, launching new products, and implementing innovative lean processes that create lasting value. Cyril has been a consultant, during which time he successfully led more than 400 consulting projects in 200 companies, delivering increases in profitability and improvements in operational performance and capacity. That's how I got to know Cyril during those consulting years. Additionally, he has taught operations management at Washington University's Olin Business School and St. Louis University's Cook School of Business. Outside of work, Cyril and his wife Amy are parents to 4 adult children, one in the Netherlands, where Cyril grew up, 2 in New York City, and the quote-unquote good child who lives in St. Louis. So if you could please help me welcome Cyril Narishkin. There you go, buddy.
Can everybody hear me if I just don't talk with this? Is that good? All right, I'm going to put this aside. Huh? Okay. I got to do it this way. All right. So, I grew up at Texas Instruments. That's where my career started in Massachusetts. And I was assigned to some of the new projects that we were working on. And I quickly found out that they can be like a black hole. You know, a lot of money goes in, a lot of time goes in, and not a lot comes out. And during that journey, we learned some of the tools of innovation. And one of the tools I'd like to talk to you about today is called quality function deployment. It's a tool that's been around for a long time. It's called the House of Quality. There's a lot of other tools that go along with it. I'm going to tell you a little bit about QFD, and then I'll show you 2 examples where we used QFD in my career that were really successful. Does that make sense? The slides will be available. Some of the slides are really complicated, so you can study that later on. And I do have an Excel template of the QFD that you can go back and use at your own companies as well. And all that will come through Jason. Okay, good? So we'll start with a little bit of background. Let me see if I get this right. Before I get going, I'm not ACE Hardware. A lot of people ask me that. ACE stands for Advanced Cell Engineering. And we're going to build an LFP factory, lithium-based batteries here in the United States. We already have a facility in Stuart, Florida, and our goal is to build a bigger factory, probably in the TVA, Tennessee, Kentucky area, that will build batteries for the energy storage and transmission, for the military, and for airplanes, electric airplanes and drones. Okay? So we are really excited about the fact that we've got a chemistry that's safer than what's out there already, that lasts longer. It doesn't actually combust. We've gotten rid of all those rare earth metals that burn, and we have a proven track record of doing these things before. So A little bit about QFD. So it's a great way to bring everyone together in your organization, with your customers, with your supply chain, and make sure that everybody's on the same sheet of music. As an engineer, it's really good because it sort of puts everything in a template, and it gives you numbers, it ranks them, and it's very helpful that way. But it's important that you have a great team that communicates and that you have good relationship with your customers. That's kind of like the basis to get going. Does that make sense? So this is what the House of Quality looks like. And it's got a little roof on it, it's got windows and doors and things like that. But each part of this house has a purpose. So the pointer doesn't work, so I'm going to try to use my finger to point. The top part of it is basically the technical specifications. You know, we're going to make it this size, we're going to make it this weight, it's going to go this fast, it's going to be this price, etc. And then on the left side window over here, you've got what's called the voice of the customer. That's extremely important to get through and understand. The voice of the customer is what the customer would like to see in the product you're delivering. And we're going to talk a little bit about what that is, because some things are really obvious and some things are hard to understand, and we have to sort of flesh them out. And then in the middle, you've got this relationship between what you think that the specifications should be and what the customer says they want. And we'll show a couple of examples of that. And at the bottom, you list out, you know, this is the size, the actual measurement, and you compare yourself against your competitors. And then over on this window over here, you say, okay, the customer says they want it fast, cheap, and better. What does that mean? And how do you stack up against your competitors? So you actually have this grid that maps out how you stack against your competitors for each of the things that the voice of the customer is telling you. All right? So we'll go through a couple of examples. Here's an energy drink example. I'm going to try to make it big so everyone can understand. I got rid of a lot of the numbers, right? So you've got the voice of the customer here. You've got the tastes. They want a great tasting energy drink. They want nutrition. They want it to look nice, cool, right? I'm working hard. I want this thing to look cool. I want some value, right? So those are the voice of the customer. And then over here at the top, we got to have a good price. We got to make money. We're still a business. What size is this thing going to be? The calories, the sodium, and the fat. The little buttons in the middle talk about the relationship between those different aspects. So you've got a very strong relationship as a solid button. If it's an empty button, it's just a relationship, a strong relationship. Weak is the triangle. So for this purpose, I got rid of the weaks and all that. I just want to talk about the strong and the very strong relationships. And then you've got the customer priorities for those different voices of the customer. So they say that taste is very important, and visual appeal is very important. That nutrition is actually not as important of those other things, right? And then you stack yourself against your competitors, where 5 is the highest, you're doing fantastic, and low is you're not doing very well, and you see how you stack up, right? So does anything pop out to you as you're looking at this right now? Look at that taste level. Huh?
Taste the visual appeal.
Speak up, I can't hear you.
Visual appeal pretty high.
Right? What about it? Anything coming up?
You're not the best at anything, but you're the worst at something.
It's a good way, good accountant talk, right? You didn't spend a lot of money on stuff, right? So taste is super important to them. And you come out as the worst in taste, right? You come out better in value, but it's not as important to them, right? You've got the opportunity to improve your taste and improve your nutrition, which are the two things that the customer really wants, and really improve your stance in the market. So if you're going to invest as a leader in this particular energy drink, You're not going to focus on the visual appeal as much. Those are the two that you could focus on. Does that make sense? Okay? So, these are the steps of building that house of quality, right? You go through, and the first step is really important. That's that voice of the customer. You're going out and you're creating an opportunity to talk to your customer. You know, the Toyota Go See thing. So you go and visit your customers. You spend time with them. You visit with the folks that are front line to your customers. What are the things that they're struggling with? What are the things that don't work, right? And you have to tease out in those conversations some of the things that they may not even know they need yet, right? And you have this opportunity to talk to them and figure it out. And it's important that you go do this in a very, methodical way. You go out and meet as many customers as you can and talk to customers who you've lost. Figure out why you lost those customers, right? So that first step is incredibly important. We'll talk a little bit more about that. That second step of figuring out what are your technical specifications is going through your internal organization, looking at competitors' information. What do they say that they do well about their product, right? And sort of teasing out what are the things that you're missing in your own product. And you relate all that stuff together, and then you do the analyses. So here's another example. This is a dry cleaner. I try to choose some examples that are easy for us all to understand. Dry cleaners, right? So the customer wants it completely clean. They want perfect press, no delays at the counter. You don't want to sit there and wait a long time, just want to get in and out. They want quick turnaround, and friendly service was actually not that big of an important thing. On our specifications, we said we have to have good training. We want to make sure all these different components of our manufacturing process of dry cleaning works, right? So there's cleaning the solvent, changing the filters, doing some no rust on the line, and good maintenance, right? And then over here, this is the way I like to do it, where you have the numbers 1 through 5, and X is us, A and B are the competitors, and you can sort of see in this map how you stack up against the competitors. So for completely clean, we actually do really, really well, right? So you can go to your accounting guys and say, yeah, it was worth spending all that money on getting the equipment right and getting everything good because it's important to the customer, and we do better than everybody else. Does that make sense? And you've done this analysis by getting feedback from the customer, actually analyzing. In this case, you could actually take your clothes to your competitors and have them clean it and see what happens, kind of thing, right? And then down here on the technical part, right, we have the fact that we're one of the best as far as training. We blow the customers out at, we're one of the worst as far as training, right? The customer B does it really, really well. So the training could actually impact everything. It impacts everything as part of the organization. But here we got this thing that says we're not the best at training. The customer really doesn't care about friendly service. That was interesting, right? In this particular case, they just want to get in and out. They want the things clean. They want it pressed right. So we don't need to spend a lot of money making, the training, the customer service be the best in this particular case. Does that make sense? How the data kind of sort of filters back out to you and tells you stuff about your process. There's a lot of snickering going over in the front here. Does that make sense? Any thoughts? Any other ideas coming out of that? So the voice of the customer. So we'll dissect that a little bit. When you go talk to a customer, there's things they're going to say they absolutely know they need, right? And there's things that are just basic requirements. So some are basic, they're expected. When you pick up your phone and you hit the on button, you want to have service. That's just an expectation, right? Some requirements are functional. You want the fact that it's the right price, that it has all the different functions on that cell phone, right? You want the Amazon package to be delivered in 24 hours now. It's insane to think about, right? Those things are just expectations now. And then the next thing is those things that delight the customer that you wouldn't have even expected. I mean, think about it 5 years ago. Would you have expected to order something and then that afternoon delivered at your house? But it happens now, right? And in fact, if we say we're going to get it delivered that afternoon at the house and it doesn't happen, we get upset about it, right? Amazing how that changes so quickly. So those latent expectations that delight at first then quickly become part of the performance. Does that make sense? So you have a very short-term life on the latent requirements. So I've got an example of the 3M Post-its, versus the tape. Remember how you used to be able to, you remember the olden days when you had a presentation, you had those big posters, and you had to like tape them up on the wall and then rip the wall off and you had the paint coming off? You don't have that anymore, right? I did a lot of presentations, so I remember the olden days like that. What are some other things that went from latent to now part of the requirement? Can you guys guess some? Think about your life. Any other latent to? Nobody has any ideas?
Email.
Email, yeah. Think about the way that we used to, I actually thought that the other day. My father-in-law and my father would get mail. Mail, remember that? With a stamp on it and your address. You'd open that piece of mail, you'd read it, right? In some cases you had a secretary type up your response, then you corrected that response, and then they retyped it out because it wasn't saved anywhere, right? And then you wrapped it all together again and send it back out. What is that, 2 weeks? The person sends you something and you get it back in 2 weeks. Now, if we don't get back within the same day, maybe hours, people are freaking out. It's a great one. Any other ones? iPhone, yeah. Think about it. I mean, I think about the fact that as a kid, I used to run around in Holland, in the Netherlands. I had no way of telling my parents where I was, right? Spend the whole day out. If my kids did that to me, I would absolutely freak out, even now as adult kids, if I don't know where they are, right? In fact, some people actually track their kids. I'm not one of them, maybe. I don't know, are you guys one of them? Even as adult kids, I know where my kids are, right? Right? That's a great example. What else? GPS, exactly. Do you remember those maps? Right? I'd have to memorize where I was going before I left. Now, you can actually look and see the pictures of the buildings you're going to go see before you leave. And if that doesn't work, you're frustrated, you're upset, right? So there's some examples that you need to tease out with your customers. You go to your customer, find out what are the things that would delight you, but know in your head that once you delight them, all right, think about the old crankshaft on cars. All right, have you ever seen how that works? Breaking your arm? Now we expect not only a key, but just to walk up to the car and the car opens up, right? Okay. So here's an example of, I don't know if you can see it. Do you remember the BlackBerry? Yeah. Oh, I was so proud of my BlackBerry when I finally got it. Right? It was amazing what it could do compared to everything else, right? But I've got really big fingers, so I don't know about you guys, but typing on that thing was a pain in the rump, right? I actually used to use the stylus to type on it, right? And now we've got the keypad as part of our screen. The whole screen's available for seeing what the picture's like. And we'd be frustrated if it was back to that tiny little screen, right? And the amount of function that's available in not that much, it's actually thinner now, it's about the same size. That makes sense? That's a good example of that. As you're dissecting the voice of the customer, I'm using this example, you've got to understand the different categories of your customer. So in this particular case, we're looking for a new car, right? So you go out to your customers and you say, what are the things you want to look if we designed a new car? And they come up with this list of things, easy to drive, quiet, excellent finish inside. You've got all this list, and then there are preferences. You've ranked them all. You've talked to, 300 people, and you've got it all ranked out, right? But if you actually looked at it in categories, you've got a performance driver and you've got a practical everyday driver, right? And once you rip those two apart, it's a completely different view of that same data. So the first part of your voice of the customer discussion is to realize who the categories are in your customers. And make sure that you understand that those categories have different requirements. So the performance driver, he wants an aerodynamic design, or she wants an aerodynamic design, fast acceleration, hugs the road. That's not as important for the practical everyday going back and forth to work and going to the grocery store and going to church on Sunday. Does that make sense? So I've got two examples of QFDs. They're kind of hard to read. Here, one is a drone and one is a refrigerator, right? But as you read them, you'll understand that, this is where we stack up. So in this particular drone example, we have the arrow is us, where we stack up against our competitors, right? So at the very first line, which is the drone stylish, wow, as an engineer, you're like, who cares? It works. It's great. It has great battery life. It, goes higher, does this. That's what came out. And I can't spell stylish, so you can see that later. I didn't grow up in this country, right? But that's supposed to be a T in there. But stylish, right, would not have been the first thing as an engineer that you would have thought about, right? But yet that's what the customers want. They want this thing to look cool, right? And there's a really good example of that. I don't know if you guys remember the F-35 when it first came out as a Joint Strike Fighter. Boeing came out with a better product, absolutely better product, but that airplane looked ugly, if you guys remember that. So Lockheed got the contract, not because it was a better product, but it looked cool. And if you're a jock that's strapping into that thing, he or she wants the thing to look cool, right? So stylish came up high, and you actually don't rank very high on stylish, if you look at that, right? You're one of the worst in stylish. So that's where that data can come back and help feed the information. Okay, guys, we got to go hire marketing. Who's the marketing guys in here, right? and ask, some designers to come in and do some work. Does that make sense? This one is for you guys to read later on, and you can dissect it yourself. But this is the refrigerator one, right? And this was just to show you that these things can get quite large, right? As the system gets more complex, there's more data, there's more information, there's a lot of things going on here, right? But this is it captures in one place a lot of information about where you need to go with your new design, right? Then you can start executing the other tools of agile project management, right? And doing the PFMEA and the DFMEA and the design for manufacturability. But now you've got sort of a roadmap. Does that make sense? Any questions here before I start giving you examples of 2 times that we use this? All right. So before I do this, I'm going to give you this Excel spreadsheet to go do and play with. And if you've got questions, you can ping me. But one of the things a lot of people, whether they're drafters or drawing or whatever, use mechanical pencils. And so as an example, I use this mechanical pencil thing. So we're the Pentel mechanical pencil, and compare yourselves against these other 2 more expensive. And everyone can sort of get that, and you can use that as an example in your own company if you want to play around with it, okay? This is the template that I'm going to give you. It doesn't fit on here, but there's a little part at the bottom where you can actually see the map at the bottom as well. But here you're actually writing down the specifications, right? So if the first thing you have as a specification is the size, write down your size. And then you write down the size of your competitors and how you stack up against them, right? If it's the speed, write down the speed that you have. Does that make sense? Capture everything in one place. So here's the first example. Some of you know I ran a company here in town called Bitro. We made they make battery charging and testing equipment. The company was sold to a large German conglomerate. And these pieces of equipment help the companies who are coming up with new battery technology understand how the performance of that battery works. And the cool example I've got is for the Formula One race cars, even the ones that are not E-Formula, they have a big, huge battery. They're basically a hybrid. The company that was testing for all the different teams in the UK took one of our big machines, paired it up with an environmental test chamber, and our machine basically had that battery run through a course, a race course. Could be the Monaco race course or the Dubai race course, in the weather and the heat and the cold, over and over and over again, and ping that battery for performance, right? So over here is the big Bitrode machine next to this gentleman, and the environmental chamber is over here, okay? When I first took over the company and we were losing money, one of the things that I realized that we had 20-year-old technology. And our competitors were just killing us in the market. We had equipment that was very solid and lasted for a long time, but it was still 20-year-old technology, right? And his wife, she actually used to work there and sold that technology when it first came out, right? So we started talking, so it was 20-year-old technology was a challenge. The competitors were launching a digital version of our analog equipment, and we were losing market share. The voice of the customer, when we started talking to these customers, and it was great at the beginning because I was new, go visit the customer, find out what they were looking for. You know, they were like, you take a lot of room in my lab. You take a lot of room on my production floor, right, at the end of manufacturing to test it before it goes in. So actually that big machine that you see there, before there's some Amazon trucks that run around, and there's some pickup trucks that run around that are electric. All those batteries are tested on Bitrode machines before they go into the vehicles, okay? So they wanted more circuits in the same footprint. They wanted more accuracy. They wanted to be faster. They wanted onboard signals so they didn't have to go to a computer to find out what was going on. There's a lot of other things, but that was basically it, right? So I was talking to a lot of customers, finding this out, okay? So after we gleaned that sort of piece of information, we came up with our own QFD. I'm not going to share this with you because there's some information, it's really tiny. There's no numbers on here. There's nothing confidential. But we came up with our list of things. And at the very top, the circuit density, right? How many circuits can you put? How many things can I test in this small footprint? Right? That was the #1 priority they had. And then the speed and the accuracy came out. The data came out that way after we talked to a lot of different focus groups. So we talked to the customers, we talked to our own service tech teams, right? And then we listed out all the specifications we thought were going to be important based on what we saw with our customers, our competitors, and what we thought was important. We listed them up at the top in the blue, right? And we ranked them, right? So that was the first pass, right? Then we had an idea of what to do. We actually started some testing in the lab. We created a mock-up, and we had this mock-up. And with the work that we'd done so far, we went back to the customer and said, look, 2 of these old machines, these MCVs, take this amount of room. In about the same footprint with this new machine you guys talked to us about, we can get all this. So instead of just 32 circuits, we can get 240 circuits. You don't even need to know what circuits mean, right? Does that make sense? If you're an accountant trying to buy something for your lab, in the same footprint, you have what? 240 circuits versus 32. That make pretty good improvement, right? Oh, and by the way, it's faster, and it's got a touch screen on it. And you know, the customer's like all excited about having an onboard computer, and each of the shelves that has 6 different test points having a little screen so you could understand what was going on. Got a lot of great feedback. Got some, hey, you got to fix this, got to tweak this, don't like the design, things like that, okay? So we did our second round of voice of the customer, got some feedback that we're on the right track, right? Energy regeneration. So we went back and we re-looked at our thing. We actually got some of our competitors' equipment that were digital and tested it against ourselves. in this particular case, it just worked out this way. We put the 5 over here, so the best is closest. And you see that at the beginning of the things that were important to the customer, we ranked, and we did this in our test lab, right? So we compared ourselves against the competitor and found out that, yeah, we actually have better circuit density, we're a bit faster, but we're a bit more accurate. And we tested it over and over again, could share those test results with the competitor, with our customers. Does that make sense? And so we ended up being able to launch a machine called the Bitrode Digital Cycle. We'll go back a second. And one of the other things that came out is we called it the Digital Cell Tester. As good engineers, we came up with a great acronym, DCT, which apparently is a horrible disease. We didn't realize this until we started talking to all our customers about it. It was very embarrassing. So it was important to have that first round of talks before we finalized on a name, right? Okay? Does that make sense? So, and one of the important parts of this whole journey with Bitrode was making sure that our team was actually coalescing. So when I first got there, there was a lot of animosity between the different team members. We weren't actually talking. And so we had to sort of build a culture of being able to be safe talking to each other and engaged. And that was very important in that process to be able to do that so that we could actually get some valuable, productive time together. Does that make sense? So that's one of the sort of foundational things that had to happen. So this is we ended up going to the market with, and we had our touch screen up at the top. It gave you all sorts of information. It was basically an onboard computer. It took the whole top of that machine. And then quickly customers were like, well, if we put another couple of shelves in there, can we get more circuit density in that same footprint? But you said you wanted a computer. No, we'll use the computer over here. And that was a really interesting thing for me, because we had talked to them about the fact that right there, the technician can have all the access, and what was really important to them was that circuit density. So we spent a lot of time coming up with this onboard computer, when in fact, it wasn't really what they wanted. Does that make sense? And we didn't sell a whole lot with that screen at the top at the end of the day. We sold more with all the circuit density. And there was enough information on the little screen, it's hard to see, that was in front of each shelf that they could understand what was going on. It was like little buttons and lights and things that were going on. All right, any questions on that? And then this was sort of the impactful thing. In the old design, it would have taken 5 meters of your space in your lab versus basically 0.6 meters for the same amount of circuit density. And the new machine was a lot faster, a lot more accurate, etc. Okay? I'm going to switch over to another type of product now. This is a mechanical infusion pump. So for those folks that are doing therapy and don't want to have to go back to the hospital every day and don't want a big clunky electrical pump in their room, we want to be able to go to work, for example, or we want to be able to go do stuff with their family and they have to have the infusion 3 times a day. This mechanical infusion pump is a company I ran up in New York, in Chester, New York. Okay? So the guy who invented this is a brilliant man. This is what he came up with, right? And we were in a couple of therapies, but essentially you can see the lady there working at it with her in front of her. And then she could read a book, or we had a little pack that you could put against, you walk around with it, okay? Again, I was new to the company, so I started talking to actual people who were using it. I met this lady. I went to talk to the nurses that were using it, and we all started figuring out stuff about the fact that this is really cool. You can do it yourself, you crank it up. So essentially what you do is you wind up that button, open up the machine, put your therapy in it, stick yourself, close it, and hit the on button, and it goes. By the way, hit the on button. Is it obvious to you what the on button is there? In fact, I don't know if you can see it, but in the slides when you get them, the off position, the word off kind of drifts off into the bottom, right? So you see the top of the O, the top of the F, and the top of the F, right? And there's no word on. So for a lot of these folks that were just getting started, it was hard to understand what on and off was. It was kind of hard to get this knob and turn it around, right? And it wasn't heavy, but it was just bulky, right? It was about this big. I didn't bring it in with me, right? And I got a lot of feedback that the thing looked weird. As an engineer, I didn't care less about the way it looked. It was cool, right? It did all this stuff, right? But look at it. It does kind of look weird now that they said it to me, right? And so we went back to the drawing board and we did the first sort of pass of making the button stand out, the knob, so you can see exactly where you're doing it if you're late at night. We had the on and off international buttons of the line in a circle, clearly visible, right? And we made it a little bit easier to load and unload. So that was the first step, right? We could keep the same molds, almost, we just had to modify them, et cetera, et cetera. And then we went to the drawing board and we started talking about, what did we hear? So we heard that the customer wants something that looks cool. Okay, right? And the iPhone was coming out, so we looked at the iPhone. We had a consultant that came in that could help us engineers think about stuff like that, right? And we figured out that it had to be kind of all compact, and then we realized that the cranking mechanism that we had, although cool, could be used in a different way. And so we started playing around with all sorts of ways of creating that cranking that would allow the syringe to be pushed very gently in to dispense the medicine, right? So we did all that work in the background, did a lot of testing in our labs, did a lot of springs and things like that, and we came up with this. So this little machine sits in your purse or your briefcase, or now it's a backpack. Nobody has a briefcase anymore, right? And all you do is pull it apart, and that was the cranking. How cool is that, right? And the loading was so easy. Just lift the whole thing up. It was easy to place the syringe in there. You close it, you hit a button, and it just slowly cranked down. And then when it was done, it was small, compact, and looked a lot better. We spent a lot of time on the design of this thing. But it looked a lot better, right? And it did all those things. So it was lighter, it ended up being lighter, smaller, and it had this very easy cranking process. Nobody had to try to figure out how to turn it, which way to turn it. We're just pulling it apart. That make sense? And a lot easier to load. You could see really clearly how the syringe was working. And if somebody saw it sitting on your bed table or in your living room, it didn't look weird, okay? And it had this sort of modern look. I don't know if it still looks modern, right? So this is what the two stacked up next to each other look like. We got the weird one on the left, right? And the one on the right, and you can go look online, people using the instruction manual on the RMS Edge, as we called it. We spent a lot of money on the name. I'm not sure that RMS Edge is the right word, but that was the name that came up. But what do you guys think? Does it look better? It's less, slicker, and it still kind of looks modern, right? Even today. So that was about 10 years ago. Okay? So those are the two examples. I have a couple of final thoughts, and I'll open up for questions. I'm going to do one more example because I got a little bit of time. Let me just do that example. So if you were thinking about a car, designing a luxury car, this is another example you can use with your team. Right? You've got the Bentley, you've got the Rolls Royce, you've got the big Mercedes, and then you got the Maserati, right? And you want something that's a spacious back seat and luxurious finish and quiet and smooth ride with good materials, right? You can brainstorm with your team what are the different things that need to be happening, talk about the competitors. It's fun for them to look at all the different pictures of the 4 different categories, and then use us as the Laguna. Has anybody ever seen this car? This was the British version of a luxury chauffeured car. So what are the things that strike you with it right now, just looking at it? Huh?
It's got a long front.
Got a long front. Yeah, it does look powerful.
Those wheels are horrible.
Say it again?
Those wheels are horrible.
The wheels are horrible.
It's too small.
It's too small. What part of it is too small? The back seat. It's supposed to be for your chauffeur to drive you around.
It does not look luxury either.
It doesn't look luxury, right?
What year is that?
I don't remember. You can look at Doug Moreau, if you know him, he's got the little thing about it.
The new Cadillac?
Huh?
You have a picture of the $350,000 Cadillac?
No, I know. Is it like that too?
No,
Okay.
no, it's much bigger.
Okay. But,
It looks equestrian.
huh?
It looks equestrian.
Looks a question.
It's like an 80s Chrysler.
An 80s Chrysler, right? It's ugly! There we go. We finally got the word out. It's an ugly looking car. Seriously, is this what you want to drive up to your club with? Being chauffeured? Right? And then you can get into it and look at the fact that you can't even get in the back seat. They've got this little hump where the wheel is, which is an ugly wheel. You're right, right? You can't get in the back seat. Look how much leg room you have in the back seat. Right? So you can play with your team about whether this actually met the requirements. You know, it looks ugly, got the back, you know, the wheels in the back are in front of the door. And then you can ask the question, this is the new Laguna that they've got. I don't know, have they learned their lesson, right? No, the back seat's still tiny and they're doing it all over again, right? All right, before I open it up to questions, so now the final thoughts, make sure you have your team engaged. My wife actually helped me on a couple of different projects on it. This is what she does. She wrote a book the first time. She's actually got a book coming out next Wednesday. So if you want to buy it Wednesday, that'd be great. Right? Called The Communication Connection. She's got some great examples in there of how, you know, and you may actually be able to tease. There's 2 examples from the different projects she did with me. She was really cheap. That was one of the other reasons. Every time I was doing a turnaround, it was a great way to use your, you know, some cheap resources, not have to pay right away. Make sure you listen to different voices. So in both cases that I told you about, I got a lot of resistance about going to customers that we had lost. Why are you spending time with them? They don't want to talk to you. They're never going to talk to you. Are you kidding? People love to complain. Right? Going to those customers that we lost, we got more information from them. They absolutely wanted to meet me and tell me how bad the previous leader was. Not that that was the goal of the thing, right? But out of that, we teased some things out. Right? Does that make sense? If you're in a distribution model, talk to the distributors that don't want to carry your product anymore. Why? Right? So make sure you're brave enough to talk to those different voices. And you have to dedicate time. This isn't something, I know there's a lot of, you'll look online, you'll see QFD Lite out there, but that's not what I've been able to use, right? And this is in conjunction with a lot of other tools. This isn't just a one and done, you do this. You got to do these other tools as well, right? You got to design it properly. You got to make sure the financials work, right? So all those other things have to be involved. And then finally, that term that you may have heard, GETMO, good enough to move on, right? You can get down this black hole and spin down and talk about details that at some point you got to start selling. Does that make sense? It's not going to be perfect. Right? Does that make sense? All right. Any questions, any thoughts before we bore you all to death? Yeah, go ahead.
Back on your charging station where the customer wanted the screen and then once you showed it to them, they changed their mind. That happens all the time, right? I don't know what I don't know until I see it. Like, oh, that really wasn't it. Do you feel like there was something you could have done to mitigate that?
Yeah, it's a great question, right? So the question was that onboard computer, we spent so much time designing and making sure we had the room for it and all the power supplies and everything, right? And then they really didn't want it, right? Is there something we could have done differently? Well, the frustrating thing for me was that remember how we went back to customers and said, this is what it looks like, kind of. They didn't like the hatchet design things, but they said, that's cool. You can have on the computer everything we need to know right there, so the technician can change everything on those stations right there. Yep. And then they didn't want it. I don't know. I mean, you're always, like you pointed out, I think everything is going to happen all the time, right? And we did sell a couple like that, especially if it was just that one machine that they wanted for their smaller lab or their production line. But in the big labs, where they had already been accustomed, because of us, to have a computer in like a control center, right? Then they were okay with ripping that off and just having the lights on the shelves. Good question.
That happens in IT all the time.
Happens what?
Happens in IT all the time.
Yeah, it happens in IT all the time.
So, two questions. One, what was your typical time frame on those redesigns? I mean, you're talking a process. How long did that take you? And then the second question was, when you went back to old clients that you weren't working with, did you get any of those back?
Great question. So on the last one, they became, because they felt like they had helped us design it, they became advocates. It was amazing. And they were like coming to our booth and telling other people in our booth how awesome this thing was. It was fantastic. So on that one, not all of them, but a lot of them became advocates because they felt, and that was one of the key things that in this process, you've asked them for opinions, you've come back to them and said, hey, this is what it looks like now, what do you think? They become part of the process, and they kind of want to buy it now, right? So that last question is great. What was the first question? I already lost
Just
it.
timeline.
Oh, the timeline, yes.
During that process.
All right, so, yeah, on the first one, it took us a good 2 years before we got to something that we could start selling, right? On the second one, we had a little bit more time, so, and especially since we ended up doing a lot of work with these designer people, so as an engineer, I was like, oh God, we're gonna know one of these other meetings, right? But, you know, we talked about the edges, we talked about the colors, and I'm colorblind, so I really couldn't care less about the colors, right? So it was a really hard, tough part for me, but it ended up looking really cool, right? So if you don't need to go through all that, and you can get to a product that's a design process, it probably, you know, a year to 2 years, depending on how complex it is. You know, that first machine is 2,000 parts to it, so. Did that answer your question?
It did.
Okay.
Thanks.
Cyril, two lessons I learned the really hard way on the voice of the customer were, one, document.
Thank you.
So we had a program where once a month we had the sales team and customer service got together, and they kept track of everything they said no to a customer on.
Oh, nice.
It was amazing. I mean, that was our product development for about 18 months, just addressing current problems. And the other one we didn't think about too much later was we would always go to the purchaser or the C-level person for feedback. We started hosting focus groups with the operators, because the operator would immediately say, I don't need that screen, here's how I do it. Where the purchasing or the C-level person looked at it and said, oh, that's cool, then they can do this. But when we showed it to the actual operators, they said, we don't care.
Love it. Thank you, Larry. So go talk to
But
them.
those are, I mean, it took years to learn that, and we would have been much more successful, much faster had we adopted those.
Right.
But
So looking
So
back,
important.
if I'd had that data of all the customer feedback, it would have been helpful at the beginning, but in both cases I didn't. So whoever sells CRMs out here, it's a good plug for you guys.
anything you say no to.
Right, track your customer complaints. Any other questions?
So are you based here in St. Louis or no?
I live here in St. Louis. I've lived here in St. Louis longer than I have anywhere else in the United States, in my life rather. And my wife and I actually chose St. Louis. We're the weird ones, right? We looked for cities about this size. You know, it was Austin, you know, Charleston, Raleigh, Durham, and we were just enamored by the fact that there was a free zoo, a free art museum. We moved from Boston. You take a mortgage out every time you go to the MFA in Boston, right? And there's no traffic. I mean, you guys complain about traffic. You're really cute when you complain about traffic, but there is no there's no traffic. And then when we first moved here, there was this thing called TWA. Remember TWA? I think the thing that shocked us the most is how St. Louisans have a chip on their shoulder about their city. It's a really great little city to raise a family in, and we should be more proud of that, you know what I mean? But there's a plug for St. Louis. But the pilot line, or the small production line, is in Stuart, Florida, which apparently you guys know because you play this game called baseball, and something down south of Jupiter or something. And yeah. Any other questions?
I have one.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about ACE and what you're looking to accomplish?
Yeah, so back to ACE. We had this chemistry that the founder developed over years. So he actually built the first LFP, lithium iron phosphate factory in the United States. It's still running in Pennsylvania. He built the first one in China, because we remember how we were like shipping all our technology over there? We're kind of knuckleheads with that, right? So he built the first one, the second factory in China, and the third factory in China. And 2 of them are still running there. So we actually know what the Chinese are using for a formulation, because it was his formulation, right? That he had developed with the founder, the guy who invented LFP, right? So we have a formulation that leapfrogs the competition, and we want to build it here in the United States. And we had some investors lined up. One of them backed off completely because of all the chaos. He wants to make money in this chaos, is his response. And the other one has hit the pause button because a VC firm hit the pause button because of the chaos as well. So I really want things to start normalizing so we can get back to people investing, and because we want to build factory here in the United States. It would employ jobs here, bring the technology back that we invented, and it would be used on our grid. So right now on our grid, there are Chinese batteries that have an onboard computer, or BMS, that's controlled by the Chinese company. I'll let you go on what that means, right? Literally, guys, how idiotic can we be, right? So I want that to happen. So if you know anybody who's like a high net worth individual can help us with this little thing. We have a PE firm lined up for the building of the factory. We just need some boost of investment to get us a UL certification and some contracts. All right. Well, thank you very much for your time.
All right, how about another round of applause? It's a great man, going through some challenges right now. So let's see, Jace, can we get a picture, please? While we're getting set up for that, our next event is on July 11th, the speakers to be determined. We're working on that right now. There are new feedback forms in front of you on your table. If you want to, let's all look at Jason here. There are new feedback forms on your table. There's a section down below. If you're having a problem in your company or you know somebody that is, please check the box that you're having a problem with, put your name and email, and what we'll do is we'll interconnect you with somebody within the ecosystem of MML. It's not a marketing list. You're not going to get added to some kind of a big list or anything like that. We'll connect you one-on-one with somebody who would be able to solve that problem for you. If you could, please recycle and throw away your trash. And please return your name badges at the table on your way out where you picked them up. So thank you all for being here. It's supposed to be a beautiful Mother's Day weekend. Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers. And I hope you all have a great time this weekend. Thanks for being here.